All right, let's go. All right. Tim, I have to admit, Jarno Capelanan and John Davison. Well, Jarno Capelanan is the general manager
of Columbus. Yeah.
And I don't know what John Davison is. What is he?
Like the president, chief bottle washer or something.
And talk about, I'm sorry. I hired him. Oh,
it was Cindy was like they hired Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
He says, I apologize to the fans, and I went down and I apologized to the players, and I apologized to the management. And
you know what the players think of that?
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that now the new coach, he's kind of in a tough position now, don't you think?
Boy, he's going to be in a tough position because now if he hollers at them, geez, I better not holler too loud. But...
like the thing is, Dad, and Cindy, you and I talked about this. We talked a little bit on the last podcast, Dad, is that we've never heard the story if Babcock gave his resignation. Yeah,
you never will.
Or if the GM and Davidson said, we want your resignation.
Yeah, you'll never will. Maybe in about 3 or 4 years you might find that out.
Because... like, there's a big difference, right, Cindy?
Oh, big difference, And the thing is, we were talking, as I said, and, well, you never know. I think Babcock had a lot of FU money, and he could read the writing on the wall what this team is like and said, you know what?
$8 million.
I don't need this.
Oh, he got a lot of money from the...
And there's always two sides to a story, right, Dad?
Let's face it, though, he did a few things that are a little strange. Modano, when he was going for his 1,500th game, he... didn't even dress him, I think.
No, he sat him for the last 5 games, so he didn't get 1,500 games. Babcock did.
I don't understand that. And Spezza, that was the one that got me. Spezza, he didn't even... did he dress for that game?
No, he didn't even dress him. It was Jason's first game in Toronto.
Yeah, his mom and dad were there. They're all jumping for joy.
So, you know what? Doesn't that indicate he's just a mean guy?
Yeah, remember I told you what he did to Chris Chelios?
Yeah, well,
so Chris Chelios, he played in Chicago for how long, right? And then he went to Detroit. And the year that first year in Detroit, the game was that, the outdoor rink game was in Chicago against Detroit. So it's kind of like a homecoming. And he benched him.
Well,
you were saying Martin St. Louis took a shot at him.
And you'd have to think.
Why would he take a shot now? Well, and why is that?
Because long memory. You have a long memory in hockey and any sport. You have a long memory.
And I guess he must believe what you believe. Sit in the weeds and you'll get them sooner or later.
He was sitting in the weeds and he got... Now, what did he say, Tim?
It was something like, if you hire a dentist or you're going to go to a dentist, you want to go to a modern dentist, not a dentist that's stuck, 30 years in the past.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And just for people that might not recall, you were saying that you remember you were over, I'm not sure where it was, with the Olympics.
I was over in the Olympics then. I remember when he said he didn't want... He actually said he didn't want the best defenseman, which was Saban, and he did not want Martin St. Louis.
Who was the leading scorer the year before.
He was the leading scorer.
Nice.
So he pulled him aside, and I remember he says, "You're not playing tonight," and St. Louis right off the ice, right off the ice.
So 12 years later, he gets his chance to take a shot at him.
You sit in the weeds, and it'll always come back to you.
So, Dad and Cindy, the Ottawa Senators have been officially sold. Gary Bettman came up to Ottawa to help with the announcement.
And the daughters, what do they call that?
The Eugene Melnick's daughters got, I think, 10%, and they call that a legacy, amount.
I think he wanted to give those anyhow, just to keep them interested. And Ron Tullio with Oshawa Generals and the Fieldberg family, I think they're with Guelph. Anyhow, this guy made an awful lot of promises. He says he's going to be happy. Everybody's going to be happy. It's easy to say now before the season. We'll see.
Well, they got a pretty good team, Dad. You got to admit that they got, their defense isn't bad. They got good forwards now. They got that goalie.
Not quite good enough to make the playoffs.
You don't think they're going to make the playoffs?
No.
Will they be in the hunt?
They'll be in the hunt right till the end.
Is the city ever going to give them a new building?
They better get a new building downtown. That's what I think he's in. That's what I think he's in it for.
Yeah. You and I have said if it goes on forever and ever to get that new building, which it might because the city and the federal government are involved, so it might take forever, and they're not drawn and they're winning. I mean, he'll take them. There's no way he's going to put up with that.
Well, he's a businessman.
He won't put up with it like Eugene did. I remember he did and I'm going to say it again. He did the interview. He says, "Well, if the people don't come out and don't watch the games, what am I keeping the team here for?" Holy Donnie, you think he I don't know what they thought he'd say, but they sure roasted him after that for a long time.
Yeah, the fans got mad.
What's wrong with that statement? No, it's logical.
If you're not going to come out and watch the team, what am I going to keep the team here for? But he did.
Yeah, you watch. Steve Staios will be part of that team sooner than later.
He's a good guy.
He was the GM of Hamilton Bulldogs, which Andelar owns, and they won the OHL championship twice, back to back, which is pretty hard to do. Yeah, so he's a good.
They were pretty tired though.
Yeah, they're a good. They were a good team, and you watch, he'll be president or something like that.
Well, Ottawa is in a tough division too, Tim.
Yeah,
Boston, Toronto, and Florida. Boy, I tell you, that's a tough division.
I'm kind of throwing this at you, Dad. Boston, disaster in the playoffs last year, and Bergeron retired. We had a lot of people listening in Boston. How are they going to do this year?
They're not going to do as well as they did last year. No team is going to do as good as they did last year to start off with. But
will they make the playoffs?
Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. Nobody remembers what you do in the regular season. All they remember is what you do in the playoffs. That's all they remember.
So, Dad, let me ask you with that, and, the fans were great when you were in Boston, obviously, and all that. But if they have a team that's faltering and all that, how are they going to take the team? Are they going to get on them? Those gallery gods, they're a tough bunch up there.
They're a tough bunch up there, but I still say the Boston fans are pretty good fans. They'll stick with them.
So when I watch a Bruins game, I think that there are more jersey or sweaters in the stands in a Bruins game than there is any other game. More than the Leafs.
Yeah, more than the Leafs. It's hard to believe, but it's more than the Leafs. I think the Boston Bruins fans love their jersey so much they put it on and they go to every game.
Personally, Cindy, I don't know if it'll be the fans. It'll be the Boston media. We'll get on them.
We'll roast them.
Well, they're not like Toronto media. They won't put up with it if they're losing.
Well, especially over last year.
Well, and they're knowledgeable reporters too in Boston. They know their hockey, right? So
like a house. All they say is, "Well, all we can do is squeak in the playoffs and win 4 games, and we did better than last year." Right? So, Dad, we got some questions from the Twitterverse and social media verse, and people are asking a lot of questions. So the one thing everybody wants to know about McDavid, it's either the Leafs or McDavid. Those are the two main questions. Mm-hmm. So the question is, do you think Connor McDavid will score 150 or more points this season? He got over 150 last year.
No, I don't think so. And they'd be laying in the weeds waiting for him this year. Of course, it doesn't matter. He does it all himself anyhow.
Yeah. So if spread says they'll give you 5-1 that he's going to. So if you bet $1, you get $5 if he gets a thing. But you always said a funny thing with Connor McDavid. You said you don't need a winger to give him the puck.
No.
Like he just does everything by himself.
He does everything by himself, and he's going to have a great year. Don't get me wrong, but I'm going to think there'll be guys. How would I say it? Toning in on him, and a lot more than they did last year.
Okay, Dad, this is from Twitter, and it says, Don, with the way the players are today, do you think that you could coach today? And let's say if you were angry at a player, how would you end up disciplining them?
There's different ways of disciplining players. First, you yell at them, and one guy you never yelled at was Terry O'Reilly. Terry O'Reilly, when he wouldn't cover the points and the guy and his pointed score, you couldn't yell at him. You just couldn't. I mean, he'd turn around and drive you. I'd start out, well, we don't. Terry doesn't cover the points. He knows more than the coach.
So you'd be saying this when you were behind the bench during the game. to the players.
I think, well, the rest of us cover the point, but Terry doesn't cover the point. He thinks being in with the defenseman is good. Yeah.
I think that'd be worse than getting yelled at, don't you?
Man, yeah. Because now they would giggle probably and laugh. And,
they didn't. You better not giggle in front of him, boy. Boy, if you're sitting beside him. And he told me, and I don't know whether I said this, but he told me later that he used to grab the bottom of his pants, take his gloves off and grab the bottom of his pants because he wanted to turn around and just choke me to death. No, there's different ways of getting your point across. You'd have to think of a different way, just like you did Terry.
I remember those one time, Cindy. I went down, and it was a skate. And so I was down there, and Craig Cheevers and Robbie Cheevers were down there, Jerry Cheevers' son, Scott Cashman was there. And so I don't think you were planning on yelling at the players because, like, you wouldn't bring me down if you were planning on giving the players heck. But they must have done something because, Cindy, you could not believe Dad yelling at the guys. I don't know what it was, but you ripped into them, Dad. Like, we were just all four kids.
Was it in the dressing room?
It was in the dressing room. Because you remember, like, there was your office, there was a hallway, then there was the door that kind of sealed everything off. And you'd closed off the doors, and you kicked the trainers out. And so it was just you and the players, but you could hear you. And holy smokes.
So let me ask you, when you're yelling at the players, do they have to look at you or do they have their head down or?
I don't care if they have their head down. Just don't do.
But don't move.
I see the guys doing now and giving them heck now.
Yeah.
And they're taping their shin pads.
Yeah, while they're getting yelled at.
Yeah.
So they had to have your undivided attention when you were yelling at them.
Either that or I'd choke them to death. Anyhow, I had a lot of fun. Well, I doesn't sound like I had much fun.
Well, no, all the players liked you, right, Dad? All the players liked you. They said, Terry and Al Secord and Peter McNabb and Bobby Miller, all those guys said they love playing for you. That you had to, it was kind of like the way you were a father, you dad.
I was just about to say this.
You were a father. You weren't our friends. Right? And there was a difference. And we were all a little...
Oh, I was thinking something else.
We were a little afraid.
Well, I was thinking of something. Cindy? Well, what I was going to say? Well, this is what I was going to say. You raised and handled Tim different than you handled me. And in the sense of discipline. So I think that you knew the difference on how to discipline one player and how to discipline another. Like Terry, you knew not to yell at.
Well, I never did anything wrong. That's why Dad never Mom never yelled at me.
You were tougher on me than you were on
Tim. But because you deserved it.
Yeah, you deserved it.
Well, and it's just like you yelled at a player who deserved it. You never yelled at John Rattel, did you?
No,
I remember.
I never yelled at John Rattel
because he never did anything wrong.
No, you want to get into the family dynamics. I remember Les Duff, and he used to tease me and used to make me cry. And then
I did.
No, Les Duff. Remember Les Duff in the dressing room? Quick story. He used to tease me unmercifully and make me cry and all that other stuff.
Les Duff and brother of Dick, by the way.
Brother of Dick, right. So then we stopped. I straightened him out and all that. I'll tell you. That's another story. So you went up to him and said, listen, don't tease Tim. Like, it was all right that he teased me.
But you remember what you said?
I do remember what I said.
What did you say?
Well, I said to him, because you said, Cindy, we're going down to practice, and I said, I don't want to go. You go, why don't you want to go? Because Mr. Duff makes me cry, and I don't want to go and be teased. And you said, he does? I go, yes. He goes, well, I'll tell you what you say to him. You say to him, when he goes to tease you, say, well, at least I don't have a hole in the back of my head.
Yeah, he started to lose his hair.
Because he was going bald. And I guess you told Ma, I heard you say, she said it with the right inflection in her voice of sarcasm you couldn't believe. And he stopped teasing me. But then you went to Timothy and said,
okay, but
Duffy, don't tease Tim. He might as well have said, because Timothy is a very sensitive boy, unlike Cindy, who can usually take it.
If you knew Duffy was teasing Cindy, you would have said something.
No, I knew. He wasn't kidding her much. But he made her cry.
Well,
that's bad enough.
But it wasn't.
You didn't realize it had gotten to the point, but you knew he teased me.
I know. He teased everybody. He teased all the kids. When you'd bring your kids down to the dressing room for before the
Yeah.
game or anything. He'd always tease them. He used to have fun. He was only having fun.
Well, I know, but then you told him not to tease Tim because Tim was very sensitive.
Then, when Tim was coming down, I said, Duffy, I'm bringing Tim down, and I have to bring him in because
I was really young too.
Oh, you're.
I bet you I was 5 years old.
Oh, you're younger than that, Tim. You were in your diaper when I first brought you down. You were in your diapers.
Yeah.
I said, Tim's coming down. Don't tease him.
And you were the player. You weren't a coach then. This was a
No,
player.
I was a player.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was one of the players, and I used to sit over in the corner. I used to sit right around the corner, right beside him, and he'd kid you, and he was only having fun.
So, Cindy and Dad, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Spreads.ca. They're a Canadian-owned online casino and sportsbook. And if you sign up now and use the promo GRAPES, you get 10 spins on the big wheel for some big dough. They match your deposit up to $250. And your first sports bet, they'll spot you $25. And Dad, you're a big Blue Jay fan. This is Sunday morning. Boy, what a tough game last night.
Boy, I'll tell you, when they lose that game, they were losing 5-0, and they come back and they were winning 6-5.
And then they lose in the bottom of the ninth. So as a coach...
Yeah, but you could see Romano looking at his fingernail the whole time. In fact, if they showed him looking at his fingernail in warm-up.
So you wonder why did he put him in if his finger was hurting? But as a coach, Dad, what's tougher, getting blown out 10-0 or doing that down 5-0, go ahead 6-5, and then you lose?
I would rather get blown out 10-0 than lose that game yesterday. That must have been a killer.
Okay, Dad, some people are asking about the Vancouver Canucks. They want to know, can Rick Tocchet get the Canucks in the playoffs? And Hughes has been named captain of the Canucks, which I said, I just can't see this young boy walking up and asking Rick Tocchet, hey, why are we doing this? Tocchet might hit him.
The problem they have with the Canucks, one of the big problems they have, their toughest player is behind the bench.
That's right. He's going.
I remember hearing a story about him in Pittsburgh. That I'm trying to think who the player was.
It was Jagr.
Jagr was the leading scorer at the time, and Jagr was making fun of this guy's wasn't making much money. And Tocchet said to Jagr, quit making fun of this guy. You're making the money, quit making fun of the guy. And he did it again. Bang, boom, bang. Knocked him flat.
His own player.
Leading
scorer.
Yeah, leading scorer. And, it's okay to knock a guy in the third line.
Yeah, but you knocked down Jagr.
You're not Jagr, the leading scorer. And, by the way, he never, ever kidded him again.
Like I said, Hughes was made captain, and as I say, I can't see him going up and getting in an argument with Tocchet. But you were captain. In your day, they pick captain? Because they seem now today they just pick the best players, right?
Well, they pick players that aren't going to give them a hard time. One thing you don't want to do is have a captain that's going to give the management a hard time. And I remember they made me captain. 16 out of 18 voted me captain. And the two guys that didn't vote me captain, I voted for myself, by the way. Back in those days, it was really something to be made captain because, the players made you captain. And I remember Joe Crozier, they had a little piece of paper and you had to hand it in. And he was mad, but I was made captain, eh?
Because you were going to give him heck all the time.
I was going to give him heck all the time and everything. So he come out. I remember he was in the back room, and he come out and he says, and he folded all the little papers and threw them in the basement. And get this captaincy straightened out. It was a unanimous for me anyhow. Boy, was he mad.
So, Dad, when you were in Boston, you had two pretty good captains. You had Johnny Busick.
Yeah.
And then...
he was captain when I went there.
And I said to Cindy, he was the guy that when something happened on the road, he'd take care of it, right?
And he was pretty smart. At that time... Cash went a little nuts in when we traded Phil Esposito. He went a little wacko, and nobody ever knew about it till about a year later.
And that was Johnny Busick doing that.
Johnny Busick went down and paid for it, but nobody knew about it. He went to the general manager of the hotel and said, "Okay, what was the damage? $1,100. Geez, you got a new room. You could have got it for $1,100, and Cash paid it." No, not a problem. Captains in those days were different.
And then you made Wayne Cashman captain.
And then I remember in New York, I phoned him up in his room after we had our steak and everything, and I said, I'm making you captain. He says, no, you're not. I said, yes, I'm making you captain. He says, I'm not being captain. I said, well, when you get on there'll be a C on your sweater. And he was never the same after that. He was a better hockey player. He was a better everything after that. Never fooled around. And he was always in, and he was a good example of and I can't say I ever had a better captain.
I like the thing that you told me about Cash was that when he'd go over talking to the referees, and really be giving them heck, right?
And he'd be calling them every name in the book, but he'd be taking tape off a stick and handing it to him. And you can do that to referees, and you can say anything you want to them, as long as you don't embarrass them.
So then let me ask you the question. What was the difference between Wayne Cashman being the captain and Schmatzy seemed to be the guy?
Schmatzy was a little different.
He was the guy that normally went to you when there was a problem with the player.
Schmatzy was always looking for trouble all the time. With you. Somebody was benched. I remember a guy was benched, Daryl Edestrand. Remember Daryl?
Oh, yeah.
Daryl Edestrand.
The players really liked him, eh?
Yeah, the players really liked him. I remember at the wharf when we were going to send Daryl Edestrand down, and he was sitting up at the bar. I remember that. And we sat at a table, and it was Cheevers, Park, and Schmatz. Yeah, that sounds perfect. And they were giving it to me, you can't believe, and I was going to keep Jonathan over him. And boy, oh boy, did they give it to me. There's certain players on certain teams that players really like, and he was one of them.